Hi, I'm David Harmon. I'm with my partner Keith Cook, and we're with RE/MAX in Whatcom County. And today we have a special guest with us, Kirstin Hunt.
Hi.
With Chicago Title and Escrow. And I guess here's the biggest question, that thinking of like a first-time home buyer or whatever, and they're thinking title, like the title on the car, because I know when I buy a car, I've seen that before where I get a title. So when I'm buying a house, do I get the same type of title?
What does that look like?
Right.
Yeah, no, good question. So when we refer to title, it's a little bit different than buying a car. However, the property is transferred with a deed. And there's a bunch of different types of deeds. So your title insurance policy is actually going to cover, your ownership of the deed, what have you. Our whole goal is to ensure free and clear title to that next buyer, that there's nothing outstanding from past ownerships or anything like that. We're going to be searching the public record. That's what our title department does. They're the researching team, right? They're looking at that public record, which is anything recorded against the property.
Which I guess kind of goes back to the car thing, because
Right.
I mean, I know like there's like Carfax, so it like kind of tells me if that car was ever in the body shop or whatever. So is that kind of what the title policy is doing, is going back and seeing somebody's
title facts?
Yeah, right.
Ooh, I like it. We should start a segment on title facts.
Right. There you go.
To an extent, right? Like, I mean, there are certain things that we don't protect against, like, has your tire ever popped?
Right.
Has your hot water tank ever popped or anything like that? We don't protect against that kind of stuff. But we do protect against hidden risks, as well as human errors too. I mean, that's definitely something that can happen. But, it could be something along the lines of making sure that the vesting's correct, making sure that it's the correct owner. Maybe you guys are going to a listing appointment and you're meeting with Jane, but Jimmy and Jane are on the deed, right? So what does that look like? And what do you have to do from there? Where is that other person?
And that's why we see the importance so much on actually getting title and opening it as soon as possible, just to make sure if there are any discrepancies that we've got enough time to figure it out. Because like sometimes you might be under a time clock where someone's moving out of town, or there's a foreclosure, or the loan's due, or whatever, and you have to make that happen. So
1031 exchanges, things like that. Yeah,
it's cracks me up if I've seen a property that might have been on the market for months, and then we're like, well, where's the title policy? Oh, we don't have it yet. So if there was an issue, they may have had months to try to prepare that, because sometimes if someone passed away, you have to go through probate or what's happening. So it can happen. So I think, at least for me, when someone wants to meet with us, a lot of times we'll look at the condition of the home, the marketability of the home, but it's also the marketability of the title. Because if you don't have clear title, you ain't going to get a bunch of money for the property.
Yeah. And our goal is to ensure that the title is free and clear when we transfer to the next buyer. However, like you're saying, maybe someone's passed away. It's an estate situation. Maybe there's a divorce, or a pending divorce. Maybe there's been a lot of recent remodeling and stuff like that. Or maybe the owner has gone through some financial hardships, Those are different times where we definitely say ordering preliminary title, or if it's a really tricky property. And that's something that the agents would do on behalf of the seller themselves.
When I hear the word, so two words, just making sure they're, how interchangeable are they? Title and deed. So they're similar but different.
Similar but different. So our title department, what they're looking at when they make the title commitment to insure the property, is looking up all the different things recorded against the property. Certain things along the lines of easements, agreements, CC&Rs, liens, judgments against the person. Yes, we do search that as well. And, the people's names, who's it vested in. Once there's actually...
That would be who's it title. Who's
entitled to the property.
Who's entitled to the property.
Yep. So we use the term vesting in our line of work, but yeah, so who's entitled to the property, everything along those lines. Taxes, we look at that. Is there a special tax classification? Is there anything like that we need to be aware of? What does that look like?
Right.
As far as title to the property versus like ownership to the property, deed. The deed is what's the ownership. The title is policy is a commitment to insure. So you've got the commitment and you've got the preliminary commitment.
And I would say it's interesting in some cases, rare as they may be, you wouldn't want to be on title or you wouldn't want to be the owner of a property. So let's just say that someone gives you a property and say it needs a lot of cleanup. You could be on the hook for, potential contamination or something. So
you could.
So
that's a possibility.
So you want some property?
What you got? What's it contaminated with?
Right. Just research it because that's a small chance that someone wouldn't want a property, but maybe sometimes you wouldn't. Or
maybe it's landlocked. We have situations like that too where
we had one that was going to be condemned. Mm-hmm. And so City of Blaine was condemning this property. Mm-hmm. And they tore it down. And it was like 200-something thousand to tear it down. The property wasn't worth that much.
Yeah.
Do you want to own that or not? And there was
no.
It went back with
not me.
It was riddled with how it was given away in an owner contract and someone passed away. And it was luckily I got the heck out of that one because it was not a good one.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So as brokers, we get this question quite a bit because it's in our purchase and sale agreements when you're buying a house or land or a condo or selling it. There's this little provision, title insurance.
Title insurance.
And you happen to work with Chicago Title Insurance.
We're an insurance company,
right?
Yes.
And we don't really want to explain it, so we suckered you into coming
I'm here. All right. So title insurance, what we are protecting against is when you buy a home or a piece of property, it's usually a big purchase, right? Like we want to make sure that home ownership right is protected and there aren't any issues down the road. So title insurance is a little different than, say, homeowner's insurance is to where it's a one-time fee at closing. Mm-hmm. The seller pays for the homeowner's policy, and then the buyer, if there is a loan, would pay for the lender's policy. As far as, different things that it can cover are potential hidden risks, different things as far as sometimes there's human error. It can happen, right? It's a one-time fee at closing, no monthly fees or anything like that. And it protects from your ownership to the past as well. So if things happened beforehand that maybe weren't recorded or anything along those lines, it will help with that. So our whole goal is to issue free and clear title at the end. Right. And so that's what we're ensuring.
Well, and different states do it differently. So they have East Coast, West Coast, and different smaller companies. And Chicago is a huge company. Mm-hmm. But what I've seen it in my experience is just nice to know that you truly own the property and it's insured. And
absolutely,
it's a title company doing it, not like an attorney who would actually go through and have one person kind of say, yep, all of this stuff looks correct.
Yes.
And versus a title policy where you actually get a policy. They've got ton of loot to back it up in case they do make mistakes. Because I think sometimes
mistakes can happen. Right. Let's be honest. We hate to have to make them, but we have a huge claims reserve with our Fidelity National Financial parent company that Chicago Title is under. So yes, and there are certain things that maybe we won't cover, but we will let you know what that is. And so anytime we are issuing a title policy commitment, you will know what we will cover and what we will not cover, what's a covered item and what's not.
Right.
Those are exceptions.
And so then you'll go through usually when we see one, we like to order a title up front just to understand what we have because
you'll show
helpful. Yeah. You'll show who's it vested in. Like we call Jimmy says he wants to sell some property and we get a title report and it says it's owned by Jane. We're like, oh, problem here. What's going on? So it's nice to know that right up front.
It happens.
Or it says Jimmy and Jane, and we're only talking to one of them. And
whereas the other one is one buried in the backyard.
It could
is
be.
One across the world working, and we don't know.
So it's an important, huge element because it takes a lot of risk. Like you're saying,
absolutely,
buying a home or real estate's usually some of the largest investments people make. So you have the policy knowing that it's there. and the property's where it should be. You're not like, down 3 doors or around the corner.
Right. Right. You're not on your neighbor's lot when you need to be on your lot. Exactly.
So this is a policy. So the seller provides it in Washington State, I would say 99% of the time, because our local board of realtors paperwork says the seller pays for it. Mm-hmm. And if the buyer to obtain a loan, usually that lender wants additional protection.
Absolutely.
So that loan is kind of guaranteed as well. And then the buyer would pay like a fraction of the price to guarantee that loan.
Yes, the buyer would be paying for the lender's policy, and it is a bit less.
Small policy.
Yeah.
So get insurance policies. It makes sense. It's hard to buy it unless it's like if Dave or I were to sell a property to each other, if we were to either do a quit claim deed, which isn't necessarily a warranty deed, but if we did a quit claim deed, we may not get title, but there's a whole risk. There is a risk. And those are some of the biggest risks that can pop up, is when there's a lot of like the do-it-yourself type of thing. Could it be done? Yeah, absolutely. But do you know how many deeds don't get recorded at the courthouse if it's a do-it-yourself? They're like, sweet, safety deposit box. But then that doesn't make it public record. So those are the kind of hidden risks that we're looking for, that we're, protecting against. Right. Well, let's dig into a little bit more on like the types of policies and when they come into play. But it's basically, just so you know, title insurance, almost required, have to have it. And our suggestion here is Chicago, because they rule. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, there's a couple different types of policies within title insurance, but why is it so important, Keith? You tell it to your clients. Technically, I think in the state of Washington, you don't have to have it. However, I don't know an escrow company or an attorney that would close without it. It's that important. So escrow will get into that, but usually in a sale, there's going to be a buyer and a seller, mm-hmm. and some type of independent party in between them. And so instead of, like, I would say, me handing Dave some cash and him handing me the deed, mm-hmm. we're like, who goes first, or how's it going to work? Wild West stuff. So if you're escrow, I give you the money, Dave gives you the deed, you go do your magical stuff and record the deed and give me the deed and Dave the money simultaneously. Wow, that's like magic right there. It is. Yes, so it really all happens. It's a little secret. We'll get into that later. Yes. I can't imagine a situation where you wouldn't want it. Maybe a situation if it's like, I own a property individually and I want to put it into an LLC that I own. Mm-hmm. So I've already was one of the last ones to insure it. So I can see not doing that, because I would still work with an escrow or title company or attorney, but to make sure all the legal parts. Definitely. And so we want to make sure that it all kind of falls in line. So title and escrow, we are a neutral third party. So just like you said, we are definitely neutral. They're Switzerland, Canada. I think Canada's kind of neutral, right? Little close. I think they're almost like Northern Americans. Oh, okay. Northern Americans. Right. Okay. Pretty close. Yeah. I consider ourselves, if we're up at Whistler, if people ask where I'm from, and I'll say I'm from South Vancouver, because technically you are south of Vancouver. We are south of Vancouver, so we're just across the border. Yeah, definitely. Which is interesting to say that when people come in from different areas, because if you're East Coast or British Columbia coming in, it's handled separately or differently. Oh, totally. And a lot of the people are friends from the North, for example, the Canadians. We do love them. They don't have title insurance. It's like, what is this? I don't understand. And so when you're coming from a totally different area, in a different country too, it's a lot different. So one of the things that title insurance does is it's going to protect against hidden risks too. So like different things that it could like different claims within the property or anything like that. Maybe there's a mistake in public records. So yeah, what's the process when there is an error found? When there is a claim. So anytime we receive like an email or a letter about a claim, we obviously send it to our underwriters. Our underwriters, those are our legal teams. Right. And they will determine if that fits within their title policy or not. Okay. And there's 3 different types of policies with different coverage options. So that is something that it might fall into that title policy. It might not. And they will hear back from our underwriters. It's not
most of the claim type stuff isn't really done at a local level if it gets to that point.
Well, you guys have more like regionalized legal counsel. So it's not like you guys go hire an attorney. You guys have your own attorneys
we have a team
on staff that are looking at this, because real estate it's a big legal bundle and on how to deal with ownership of real estate. And that's where having insured, just like you can drive a car without insurance. You don't need it, but don't hit anybody.
But you're at risk, right?
You're at risk. So the insurance gives you that added protection of actually having an insurance policy. And it's like you were saying, it's a one-time premium. So if you own it for 50 years, you're insured back from when you bought it.
But guess what? If you say, for example, God forbid this happens, but
it's not going to happen. Nope.
Knock on wood. But say, for example, the owner of the property that is insured passes away, and without any payment exchanging hands, gets passed down to their heirs, right? Or to their daughter. Maybe they had one daughter or something like that. The policy continues. So a lot of people don't realize that it's protected through the next generation as long as it's not having money cross paths.
Does that make sense? So like if someone passes away, they have a will, they give it to one of their heirs, and then they still have insurance. I didn't know that. So I didn't know insurance keeps on going that way.
It does. Title insurance does keep on going that way. However, you can't give it to someone that's like, maybe someone pays like $1,000 for it, whatever the case may be, and that won't work.
Yep. Well, and it's not like easy to dupe or not. So a lot of like what you were saying is you're looking at public records and making sure it's there. So going to your guys' plant and just seeing how much paperwork and files you guys have, because you guys always have people at the county checking out everything that's recorded. So it has to be public knowledge. And that's why people will record things, is to actually make sure that it's public knowledge. And so you guys, for the most part, have records that you've been insuring for years and years. So if we were to go sell a home, say in Sudden Valley, you already know all about Sudden Valley, everything that's there. So you guys are just kind of duplicating a little bit of all of your past experience and then specifically making it on that one property too. So you might have all of the information on the association, because Sudden Valley is one of the largest homeowner associations in Whatcom County. Yeah. But then you'll specifically look at the individual property too and make sure, was it deeded properly? So if there was a quick claim deed and Dave gave me the property and the legal was wrong, or it didn't look like it was up to par, you guys ferret that out.
We definitely check back in time, right? So we travel back in time and check. Actually, we had the old like log books and everything from the oldest ones in all of Whatcom County before Washington was actually like a state. So patented from the state. Anyway, we geeked out over that. That was pretty cool for the title department. But what we will do is, say, for example, we haven't insured the property before, or it's been like 30 years and close to other title companies. We will go back in time and make sure that the chain of title looks correct. There's nothing missing. There's no undisclosed, hey, where's the signatures from this one? Like, we're missing this. So, I mean, we're protecting against that. And we do a lot of research.
The more we're talking about it, just reminds me that insurance is like getting new tires on your car or a roof or something, or a different septic system. It's just like, you don't really care about it unless a problem goes along with it. So
absolutely. That is the thing, is a lot of people and a lot of buyers and sellers don't really understand what it really looks like. Right. Until you actually need it. And then where is that title company at that point in time?
Right. I think we would, as brokers, be doing a disservice if we said, oh, yeah, you don't need title insurance, even if it's a cash deal. I think it's pretty important to make sure you're covered all the way through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know anyone that close it at that point.
And I'm assuming, like, on the claims, it's all different levels. Some of it's like simple, easy peasy. It's just
it could be all different levels. And sometimes it's not a claim that is a legitimate claim, but we have to treat it as such, right? Like, there's been people that, they claimed their house had a certain amount of sides, and it was maybe
like 4 sides.
It was actually like a legit claim. It was kind of a funky house.
The house or the lot?
No, the house. And if it was another, like the number that they thought it was of sides of the house, like the perimeter, right? Like beep, beep, beep. The number of the actual sides of the house was an unlucky number in that culture. So, that they put in a title claim for it. So there's different things that happen. I know there's different things. And because the bad luck of the house, they lost their job and stuff. It was a real situation.
Well, how many beep, how? So
it could be 7.
I thought
it could be a bad number for.
Was that a different type of insurance? So I thought it was just the property lines.
We may have learned our lesson on that one, because maybe at first it wasn't treated as seriously as it should have been. So yeah, we paid out a claim on that because we treated it not as seriously as it should.
All right, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because I could, and I'm very inquisitive.
I know, it's a good one. But different types of claims, like here's an example of one that has happened to one of our companies, not in our area, but we had a situation where a group of these sisters owned commercial land in California. It's
always sisters.
Always sisters, right? It's always the ladies, because I'm outnumbered here. So a group of sisters, and they lived all over the place, right? They owned commercial land in California, right? And they'd get together every once in a while and do the little girls' sister trip and go check off their land, right? Well, one day they do their little trip. They go over and they check out the land, and they're like, there is a mall being built on our land.
Oh, wow.
Good for them.
Right? Like, congratulations. Right. We've always wanted a mall. Most women do. So I'm just kidding. But so what happened then is that's a title claim. It happened to be that someone had done some fraud. There was a little fraud involved. They made up different companies, different LLCs, what have you, fake notary, fake payoffs, any of the things.
Wow.
And fraud can be pretty good.
That's hard to go against liars.
So, they were very nice. They settled for the amount of what the dirt would have been worth beforehand, because with that mall structure, they could have gone for a bit more.
Right.
Can you imagine that developer would have been out a lot? You know what I mean?
Wow.
So title insurance protects against that. So our whole goal is to make the person whole that may have been the victim. And then we go after the person that did the naughty, right? Like if they're being bad, if they're, going for that, we go after that person. Like maybe an undisclosed heir, something like that, right? That can happen where, brother Bob, he never took care of mom and dad.
Right.
So there's really just 2 of us. It's just, it's just Keith and David and Bob. Well, and so maybe for some reason they talked to the title company about this, and we're like, yeah, we need Bob's signature, bro. Like we can't do it without this.
He's in the car. Let me go.
Yeah. And then, okay, well maybe we just won't sell the property. And then they go to Brand X to try to sell the property. Yep, just David and Keith. You know what I mean?
We're not going to fall for that.
You're not falling for that.
But so rewinding a second. So the sisters were down there. And so this would never happen in Washington, but so in California, it works the same, right? So they say that the mall's there, right? Mm-hmm. So they contact the title company that they bought it from. So if Chicago or Fidelity insured it, they come back and say, just so you know, here how many acres we have, there's now a mall on it. So at that point, what the title company would do and say, okay, there's a claim. They would try to settle it. But one way is that they would give the sisters a bunch of cash and say, okay, looks like you actually just sold your property and we're going to make you whole.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go after all of the deviant parties that were trying to forge everyone. And I imagine another title company probably, because they had to have insurance on that to sell it. So
the deviants, the fraudsters,
hooligans
that did, I know the bad boys or women, whatever, they're usually gone.
Right.
You can't, they're so hard to find.
They weren't next door.
You do one of those and you can live like a king.
But so they got whole. So there was that one insurance policy. Yeah, we had to make them
whole, and they were very great about it. They were really nice about it. Our company had to make them whole again. Wow. A lot of people could stand firm and be like, put me back on that. Like if it's a house, put me back in that house. Right. Hey, give that back to us. They could go that hard. Luckily, they were very nice, and it was market value.
I had an interesting one. Just title issue mistakes happen. Mm-hmm. So Gentleman owned a piece of property.
Okay.
And then he bought the property next door. And then years later, I helped him. Years later, came out and I get a call from another broker and said, I think your guy built on my person's lot. There were 2 vacant side-by-side lots. The guy went through, had it designed, had it permitted, was signed off by the county, was signed off by the Lummi tribe. It was out on tribal property. All set. Someone was living in there, and we get, hey, woohoo! This your kind of house is on my lot. So they were pretty easy to work with. We just had them give them the lot next door and did the old switcheroo. But
yeah, there's certain things that have to happen. But yeah, that's never good.
No. And they weren't asking me about it. I came in later. I pointed,
Yeah.
So it is nice having that policy. So is there anything people can do for protection once you have the insurance? Just like knowing that you have the protection, but I guess drive by your property once a year at least, or
I think that's great. You want to make sure that there's no fraud going on. We have been seeing an uptick of that lately.
We get fraud alerts quite often. With it seems like the one we're getting noticed of is people are trying to be out of town and selling. I think they're targeting vacant land because there's no one on the property, and then they try to go back and recreate identity papers pretending to be that property owner.
Yeah, and specifically for our neighbors to the north, like if it was a Canadian owner with vacant land here, that's where they're really honing in on. I actually got to meet with the FBI to talk about what to do in those cases, where to send the paperwork. So I was getting a lot of different paperwork. The fun time this time was all the multiple IDs with the same person's face on them and different names. It's like, come on. But yeah, so yeah.
So if these people didn't have title insurance on the mall, they just would have been
SOL?
Right.
Can I say that? Yeah.
Saul? Yeah.
Yeah, Saul.
Right. So insurance is important. It's like anything. You don't, you hate it until you have to use it.
Absolutely.
The cool part is there's not the monthly grind of making that monthly payment. So, and the seller's paying for it. And the service it really gives for a seller is clearing title, because someone's not going to give you hundreds of thousands of dollars and not know if you own the property or not. So it really is a great service, and someone has to do it.
There are different types of title policies, and the brokers typically will know, in the purchase and sale agreement, there's a couple boxes that you can check in the state of Washington, right? There's the extended, the standard, and then there's the miraculous do not check the box one. The extended always sounds like it's the best, but it is actually quite expensive. I'm going to start with that one first. Majority of the time where we see it is more commercial transactions, I would say, or big like waterfront, something along those lines.
So that's going to require a full appraisal that shows, or a survey that's going to show where every little thing is.
And not just a regular survey, an Alta survey, paid for by the buyer, and it will monument.
It's negotiable.
It could be negotiable.
So Kirstin, I know, like with my car insurance, that I have like different options on what I can have.
Oh yeah.
Is title insurance the same? Is there multiple options?
Yeah, definitely. There's what is it? Limited coverage, I should say. No, I'm just kidding. So we have standard homeowners insurance, and then which makes it so confusing, right? Like homeowners insurance, homeowners title insurance. And then there's the
homeowner
extended policy. Yeah. So these are all policies, homeowner policies. So
can I have different deductibles on them or anything?
Or
is it like that?
Yeah, there's definitely different. So there's different coverages for each one, right? So I'm going to start with the one with the least amount of coverage, which is going to be the extended policy.
It sounds like it's the least.
Right? It sounds like it's the best, right? I mean, I'm not going to lie. I used to be a real estate agent, and I checked the extended policy, and the other agent's like, are you sure you want to do that? And I was like, yep, no. So the extended policy actually requires an Alta survey, typically paid for by the buyer. Those can start somewhere around like 16 grand.
Wow.
So, but what it's going to do is so instead of having the most coverage, you're going to know the most about the property, right? So it's going to monument every little pile of rocks. It's going to monument a little stream, or a little how the water runway works, or maybe there's a footpath, right? So that could have been something. So typically we see that for commercial, maybe some waterfront property. But bigger commercial, I mean, Costco definitely wanted to make sure that there is that in place. So then there is the homeowner's policy, and that is you do not check the box homeowner's policy. Or if you don't check the box, it'll default to the best policy
the
type.
Purchase and sale agreement box. So when we're buying or selling, so there's a box which actually you get to say, like ordering a pizza, which type of policy would you like?
Yes, pepperoni or no pepperoni. So there's actually 2 boxes on there, which is the extended and the standard. There's the miraculous, don't check the box, and it'll go for the best policy type for that type of property. So homeowner's policy, that's going to have your most coverage, but it's not for every type of, transaction. So different things it doesn't cover is vacant land, big commercial, stuff along those lines where there's more risk involved that things could happen.
Like with property lines. So if someone has an Alta survey, that'll go through and you at least know all the issues up front. So if the property line is off, that will be accepted or talked about in the policy.
Absolutely.
There's something here, at least in Washington, adverse possession. So if your neighbor has their fence over your property for so many years, it's open, hostile, notorious. You have to go through this kind of legal claim, but you can legally take your neighbor's property, assuming they're not a municipality. So you can, and that's where insurance comes in that way too.
Yeah.
Usually you guys do send someone out to look at the property to make sure it's there.
Yeah. So depending on the policy type, we could send someone out. So, different things like maybe the standard coverage or what have you, we're not protecting against that line as much because there's more variability, right? Or, like vehicular access versus feasible access, like those kinds of things, right?
And there's a lot that will show up, like it was policy related. So a lot of the policy would be written the same, but just like what the insurance may be. So if you have a property that is, you have to drive by 6 other people to get to your house on an easement, it'll be referenced on both one. It'll be researched the same way, but it just may not be identified the same way because the Alta may want it surveyed all the way in to make sure that the access is where it should be.
And we will be able to trace, like, so are there any recorded easements to that property for ingress, egress? What does that look like for access? And you will be able to determine, like, okay, maybe it stops. Maybe there isn't. And we've had that happen where there is not legal access. They don't have that easement through the driveway or anything like that, to be able to go, or an agreement to use.
We were doing a sale and we actually pulled our buyers out of it for a variety of reasons. But one was the owners were on a well. So they drilled a hole in the ground and had drinking water. Well, they wanted to upgrade and join the water association next door. Ran a line through the farmer's field and said, we're using this water. Well, there was never an easement drawn up so they could get to use that. And then we brought it up and they're like, yeah, too bad. And it was like, wow, it was a big deal to us because that neighbor could just go, whoop, turn the water off. And then where are you?
And that's where the problems arise, right? And, sometimes it's a friendly handshake from one guy to the next and, oh yeah, it'll be fine. But maybe that other guy sells their property.
Right.
And then, it's not known that this is happening. Maybe at the point where someone else goes to try to sell or is like, hey, there's a problem. That's where, it's like, oh boy, now we need to perfect this. And so sometimes it's the willingness between parties, which really can affect it down the line.
And with a policy, it's kind of cool. So you'll see everything that's recorded against it and all of the information that you guys have. And if there's questions on it, you can go through each, talk to your real estate broker to go over them. But a lot of times we'll say, talk to the title company and come in and have a sit down and say, all right, let's look at the title policy and go over them. If it's complicated, and say, what are each one of these? And sometimes people are bringing additional documentation that the title company might not have or explanation. So it's kind of, you're not stating you're stating it's pretty firm. This is what you believe in, but you're also not set in stone if someone has other information to the contrary or to say, what about this? So
yeah, exactly. So we wrote the title policy, right? So why not meet with us? Why not call us? We could literally put you in contact with the person that wrote it down. And what you're referring to are kind of some of those exceptions in that Schedule B within the title report. So once you penned a property, or pull preliminary title on a property before, for listing. Those reports will go out, especially when it's pending, to each client, right? Mm-hmm. The buyer, the seller, the listing agent, the selling broker. It'll go out to everyone, and it's really good to review that. You really need to make sure you've got all that information on there. The Schedule B exceptions are the ones that those are very specific to the property. Those are the ones that you really want to pay attention to.
And it's our standard practice to open title on all properties we're working on, because if there is an issue with either title and easement or the ownership or what's there, mm-hmm. giving us more time, because if we're representing the seller and we want to be always in a position to accept a cash sale within a week, and you can't do that if you don't have the title ahead of time. Right. Or if there were any hiccups to work out, you didn't work them out. So
because especially if it's sometimes you see a nasty one, Right. Sometimes there's missing people and dead people. Well, dead people. I know that sounds so bad. The times where we say it's very important to have that preliminary title pulled, like Keith said, if you're expecting you want to be able to do something that's a little quicker for a sale, as well as if it's a death, divorce. Maybe there's been a lot of remodeling recently. Right. We're going to need that kind of stuff, like lien releases possibly. Or, maybe they're going through a little financial hardship.
There's a lot to get through. That will show up there because it could be, you have lien. So any type of lien, mechanic, IRS, DSHS for child support. Mm-hmm. There could be latecomers for if you have a house, but you had to pay to hook up to the water or sewer or power or the road.
So different things that, will show on a title report. You're going to have your easements. So mm-hmm. maybe it's a utility easement. That's very common here. Right. And it might not affect me if I wanted to buy it because maybe I want the land to stay the way it is. However, maybe if Keith wanted to buy it, he wanted to build a shop. Yeah. And so he would need to know where that easement is, right? Right. So he would need to know where that is and what that looks like.
Big shop.
Agreements. So common agreements, road maintenance agreements, shared well agreements, right. Different things like that. You're going to have your CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions to a property. So those are the neighborhood, you can't have a big dolphin fountain in your front yard.
Dolphin. Chickens.
Chickens or, a big white picket fence or, make it look like chain link fence with barbed wire across the top.
Concertina wire. Yeah,
our you can't.
I just put some of that stuff in.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did actually.
So your house looks like a prison?
No, it was a rental. At his business.
So how does title get involved with CC&Rs?
So how do we get involved with CC&Rs? So we actually supply them to the buyer. The seller can definitely have them as well. So we do keep majority of them. I would say that there's a couple of them that we may say, hey, the most accurate and up-to-date ones are with these guys, and we'll get you all the contact information. That's rare. There's 2 places in Whatcom County I think we do that for. Huh. And they're quite large. But besides the CC&Rs, obviously, you and I are German Shepherd lovers.
Right.
We have to bring our attention to our love for German Shepherds.
Right.
And we actually live close to each other too. So Aspen is his dog or his grand dog's name. I'm Duke. I'm Duke. So do you think that we would want to live in a condo where they do not allow big dogs? If you only would have a dog of 20 or 30 pounds, right. I know I would be like, not for me. Right. I need my big boy, right? I need my big dog. So I would probably be an ixnay on a condo for that reason for myself.
Well, and there's still more research that's beyond the title, as mm-hmm. you're saying that. Yeah. So on, if you were to buy something like a condo, you get, which isn't recorded. So my real estate ADD is going off. But
I know mine too.
One thing is to make sure if you're developing land, record as much of it that's going to affect neighbors or to preserve your right. Mm-hmm. But there's some things that are a little bit more living and breathing, and that's the day-to-day operations of a homeowners association that aren't recorded. And so there's the minutes and they can just change the rules. So you might have bylaws, you might have some of these things that maybe aren't, the bylaws should be recorded, but you mm-hmm. might have some things that are changed, or what are the rules on dogs?
The amendments to the CC&Rs and stuff. Yeah. So we try to have as much as we can. Obviously if it's recorded, then we would have it, but if you were getting a condo, you'd obviously do your resale certificate stuff. But
And the resale certificate is cool. That's totally different subject, but that gives you all of the background on a property, and you would ask for the notes and the minutes just to fully get up to speed as far as what's going on there.
So kind of circling a little bit back, because I totally squirreled us on the condo thing, is that they're, as well on the title report, what they're going to have is the purchase price. They're going to talk about the loan amount, vesting. Those are all very important things to look at. They are going to talk about any kind of liens or judgments. So when Keith was talking a little bit about liens or judgments, a common lien could be like a like mortgage, right? Like that's not a bad thing.
No.
A lot of people have a mortgage. I got a mortgage, all that kind of stuff. So it could be something that's a monetary encumbrance is a lien, the fancy thing to say. And a judgment would be more or less against the person. So not only do we check the property, when it's a pending transaction, we will also check the person's names to make sure there aren't any judgments against the people that need to get paid off at closing.
And buyers. So if you're a buyer
or seller, either way.
And that's where I always like to get the title up front, and then soon as we, if it's our property we're representing, as soon as we will see, we get a purchase and sale agreement, we send it off to you guys, and then we get an updated title policy that shows the buyer. And there's nothing worse than like, okay, here's like $6,000 for this and $4,000 for that, and you're like, ugh.
Common ones are like, you've got your DSHS, like you mentioned,
that is very common.
Could be back child support, it could be end of life expenses, medical expenses, that kind of thing. But
they wouldn't be buying a house then, would they?
I can't say. Some people might try, but you know what? Let's pay them to current. You can.
Right.
And we'll do that at closing. So, there's different things like that. The Department of Social and Health Services, that kind of stuff, as far as like, there might be credit card judgments. Right. There might be against the person. Someone's in collections, that kind of thing. So we've seen those too.
Well, and a lot of that will get up on our kind of follow-up or other video. So this is all title. The other one on how to clear some of these title issues and how to actually get through to close it and transfer the keys from buyer to seller.
Because we work together. Title and escrow are a marriage.
There's something called Chicago Title and Chicago Title Escrow.
There we go.
I think they know each other.
All right. Just in wrapping up and talking about title, Kirstin, is there any takeaways that people should be really aware of? Yeah,
definitely. What's really important is if you are buying or selling a house, it's important to review your title commitment when it comes to you. The preliminary commitment, review what you can and can't do with the property, because it will let you know at some extent. Definitely review your name, make sure it's spelled correctly, how you want it vested. Is it husband and wife, or is it two friends buying it as their separate property? Very important there. And know the fact that if you have questions in regards to the title policy or the preliminary title commitment, that you give us a call at Chicago Title. If we wrote the policy, we're happy to go over that with you. If it gets super duper in depth and there's like asking legal questions, we will probably refer them to an attorney at some point. But that's okay. Attorneys are our friends at that point.
No, for sure. I totally appreciate your time, and somewhat I know we're just scratching the surface of that knowledge base you have, because in one, it's what can we do practically, and what are we just trying to put out here in a quick video. So my takeaway is that it's crazy not to have title insurance, and we like working with you guys because there's so many different aspects of having, someone that's personal that we can talk to, that can actually say, here's what your policy is.
Yes.
And with the escrow department and the title and the whole, it all just comes together. So it's a huge part of our business. And we thank you absolutely for coming and sharing with us.
Of course, we're happy to help uncover the unknown portion of real estate. We feel like that's the client has a hard time with the title and escrow part. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I appreciate you guys having me on. That was awesome. So coming up next, we have a special escrow segment, right?
That's correct.
So if you found title riveting, imagine what escrow is going to do for you.
It'll be at least 1.5 times better than this one.
1.5, at least.
It's pretty important stuff. It's actually equally as important, if not equally as important as title.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.